Welcome, Mere Modelites, to another episode of the Mere Models Meanderings, live here, 15th of February, 2026, 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. On a Sunday, you've got Kyra.
Hello, you got Juan on this side.
And we're two individuals here, and there's probably some more at home. And we might be feeling a bit sovereign as well. So we have this book here, The Sovereign Individual. Mastering the Transition to the Information Age by
James Dale Davidson and Lord William Rees-Mogg.
That good name. I like that last name, Lord William Rees-Mogg. If you have been interested in... And
this one was in the late 90s, I believe.
1997. And for those who are wondering, like, what the hell's going on? Why are you talking about a book? This isn't the Mere Models book reviews. I've been stopping to do them for a while and doing a semi-book review / talking about the topics of the book with Juan here on the Meanderings, the Conversations channel. So that could potentially be changing in the upcoming months as Juan goes away for hibernation retreat of a new baby girl coming.
Correct. But also, actually, while we're talking about that, I might continue with things because I was starting to think... this is adjacent, but article reading or just reading text more than anything. I have been reading a ridiculous amount of text-based articles, if you will. And some of them are, I don't know, 20 pages, 30 pages in length. I'm almost sometimes being like, maybe I could just do like a review on that. And I finished reading Accelerando recently. It was just all digital format. So I was thinking I could probably do a book review, if you will, on articles like this, which are kind of interesting. So in any case, that might also pop up as well.
Yeah, cool. So anyway, we'll be talking about this book here today and the topics within it. So if you have been in, been in Bitcoin is a weird way of phrasing it. If you've listened to enough Bitcoin podcast, for sure, you will have heard this book been mentioned many, many times. And the reason because of that is they somewhat talk about a cyber economy, and they, in particular, like a cyber money. Now, it's very... There's two things I want to illustrate right at the start. Number one, the very first, chapter, I'm trying to find what chapter it's actually called, because it's not, so some of the contents are the transition of the year 2000, the fourth stage of human society, megapolitical transformations in historic perspective. And if you read these, East of Eden, the agricultural revolution, the sophistication of violence, reading this, I'd be like, I'm already kind of a bit off-put, to be honest. And they start off, and no one talks about this, with some of the most useless writing, because they are worried about mainframes and the Y2K time bomb. So for a book that's all about the future of civilization, they spend
a good amount of time.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the first 52 pages are on Y2K. And so you might be thinking not a good start. You're worried. You're spending 9 pages on something that was essentially the most useless FUD / calamity. We're still at the stage where you like to bring this up often of the people were worried about in trains that if you're going too fast on the train, your internal organs, if you go above 36 miles per hour, whatever number they had decided on, is you'd internally explode or some shit.
Correct.
I don't think Y2K has that same level of stupidness yet, because there's people alive who believed it. But I've got to be in
it'll transition to something like that.
There's got to be people kids who'll just be like, wait, people believe that going from 99 to 00 was going to cause the end of the world.
Look, I get, you can kind of blick it down where if you had a code that zeroed out, let's just say when a number was accepted, let's just say, if you coded it, and you would know this from when you were doing your coding things, if you have it that it cannot equate to 0, because if it hits 0, then it would essentially stop a program or stop a run.
No, I didn't know that.
Right. So the way that things can be programmed, if it ever hits the number 0, it might be a reset, it might be a restart. And so you could have the path like, wow, what if the code, when it does that, then, it goes and stops traffic lights and it stops all of these processes. So like that is the only angle I can see it. But of course,
why is that different than the going too fast on a train, affecting internal organs? Like what?
Because one is based on truth, I guess I would say. You can have codes that if you equate it to 0, it breaks. Like it actually just stops working. So that does happen. But with like say the train situation, I don't think they had any proof. There was no proof of like if a human goes faster than...
I bet they were making arguments for it. They wouldn't have just been making arguments out of thin air. Like they would have been
like
equating it to other things. They
I think maybe, and
what
I don't know
about physics and biology at the time.
I reckon they would have been placing it on theory, but in the case of the Y2K, there was actual practical.
I equate them as exactly
the same. Okay.
Yeah, I don't. No, sorry, Y2K.
Both definitely very silly. Both definitely very silly.
So the book started off with that, and I was just like, oh man, this is already like not a good start. But they did mention a couple.
For people who like haven't read The Sovereign or have like never heard it from Bitcoin, I've heard it obviously of the book.
Yeah.
What the hell's the context of it?
Yeah. So the context.
Like why did you even want to read it?
So I wanted to read it because the general explanation of people reading the book who had read the book was like they predicted Bitcoin. So if you had read this in 1997 and you'd been watching out, you could have caught Bitcoin earlier. Essentially, was the argument. Like you'd have been more primed to accept it. You'd have been more primed to believe that the world is going more digital and that you can become a sovereign individual because of this. So it's essentially like if you had read this and taken it seriously, it would have primed you well for what was coming.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that was kind of like the staging for it. And it's almost like a how-to book, mastering the transition to the information age. So it's certainly of like, hey, this is a predictive type thing. Here's what you as an individual can do. And so they've essentially it's a history book because many of the chapters that I was starting to read out, and if I can find the contents page again, I will go over that. They talk about the agricultural revolution. They talk about the senile decline of the Holy Mother Church and the nanny state, how a nation state arose. They started to talk about the information age, triumph of efficiency over power. Probably the most important bit, transcending locality, the emergence of the cyber economy. So this is where they're starting to get a bit more predictive into the future. And then they actually even somewhat anticipate the AI revolution earning capacity in a world without jobs. And then a couple of like random chapters at the end, which once again, I didn't really like, the twilight of democracy, morality and crime in the information age. So I think they've done a decently, there was a couple of like pages in this where it was like, holy shit, they were talking about things that we take for granted right now that in 1997 would have made them seem absolutely crazy.
Yeah, so, like nuts. Yep.
Some of them they were off of. I'm trying to think if I wrote down the actual page, which was really good because some of them was like, it was too early. They were talking about like, well, too early in the sense of we haven't got it right now. Right. VR related stuff where it's like scanning directly onto your eyeball, or like you're watching, instead of watching a screen, you're watching it's being implanted
like directly
exactly
into your retina or something, right?
Yeah. So things like that, probably a little bit too early. Some of the other stuff though, where they were talking about media becoming a more of a like a locality type thing, so you're getting media from, externals, not these big conglomerations, but individuals. That's YouTube, that's podcasting, that's plenty of things like that. So they certainly got some of those right, I would say. And so I've got here page 398, middle summary after the quote. So I guess that's the ending. Yeah, that's the ending. So I think they were pretty decent in predicting that sort of stuff, as well as they didn't exactly describe Bitcoin and how it would work, but they were just saying like, hey, there's going to be a digital money, and they probably if you'd asked them back then, they would have said it like would have started by a company or something like that, rather than a decentralized network. So that was pretty interesting. So any questions so far, or should I jump into
so apart from the Bitcoin kind of connection, or at least the digital currency, I guess that people often talk about that, I thought the other thing about the sovereign individual is the whole movement of people being sovereign, as in moving away from state, as in moving away from the power being a way to dislocate away from a state and being able to pick up and go to wherever you want, so that you remove the power of the state or the nation to control you via tax and via position and ownership and violence. Yeah, the violence piece of it, and the return on the ROI on violence, it becomes much more difficult if you then are able to just pick yourself up and go elsewhere. So I think that was the other big thing of the sovereign individual that they talked about, and the opposing views that some people often have about this book is the true power, really being able to be sovereign to then be able to step away to operate in another environment, or is it actually remain in the existing environments, but actually remove the power that they have over you, but you still be able to participate in the system. So I think that's the other big one that always gets talked about of this topic. I think they talk about, if you separate away, you move away, and then the commons that remain can remain, and whatever happens doesn't affect you. But hey, you go to this other place and you take all the various things that you own, which is fine, sure, but then you have the onus on whatever infrastructure or setup or support that you might need. And if you don't have everything absolutely dialed in, and something bad happens, let's just say, or you need support, you're actually left without a fallback, where state, or in this space, does have those availabilities. So there is positive for when things are going negative, but there are negatives as a whole.
Yeah, cool. So probably like the first half of this, before the Boostagram Lounge, we'll talk about that, and then afterwards maybe like things I learned from the book as well, which are more the history explanation things. So so correct. As the name implies, the book was more about how you want to say more about. It's a funny book because it spends most of the book not talking about sovereign individuals. Right. It's talking about nations. It's talking about how groups of humans would collaborate, act together in these nation states, and only in the final last chapters does it have things of how you resources for achieving independence.
Gotcha.
And so it's got things of create your own wealth offshore, so tax stuff, secure your own tax-free zone, the sovereign society, lifestyle tours and stuff. And it's really funny because it's essentially just a whole list of numbers. I count 1 2 web links here, but most of it's PO box, blah 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 blah, or email or fax, and so very dated in terms of some of those resources. But yes, so the essential argument is, okay, human society has been structured in various ways from across the centuries, and there's reasons for this, and I'll talk more about those reasons afterwards, but we're getting to this stage where, in this information age, where you have more power as an individual to decide what you want to do, where you want to live, and you can do this because you own more digital assets, and so they can't be taken away from you. AKA, think about the Holocaust, and I'm surprised they didn't really mention that in here. But when the Jewish people were escaping, they were essentially having as much gold on them as possible, because they couldn't take their house, they couldn't take their clothes, really, they couldn't take valuable artifacts and vases and paintings and things like that. And you're literally just trying to flee the city. So they were taking gold, and then their gold was, being extracted from them, literally from their teeth and stuff like that. Whereas if you had control of this digitally, you can yourself move location and it can't be taken from you because it's digital in nature. It's information. Information is much more easier to store without other people getting it. AKA, I can write the seed phrase on my sock and walk through past the guards, and they won't know. Or like, the seed phrase is these 12 words contain his wealth, for example. Or you could just straight up remember it. And getting that information from people is much harder than simply taking taking the gold from them. So with all of that being said, with the ability to go to people having more individual autonomy, decision-making, where they want to live, how they want to live, and under what sort of rules they want to live, that you will see the breaking up of nation states. That's the essential argument.
Sure, yep.
Looking now 29 years later, is this the case? And they don't put timeframes on anything. So
sure.
Although you could say they predicted Bitcoin, have they predicted nation state breakups? I would say probably not. I'm trying to think, I guess a way of deciding that would be, are there more, based on their predictions, would there be more nations now than there was in 1997? Because I think in a way you could say...
Maybe less?
I would have said if there's more, that shows there's like a fracturing. And then the other way would be of trying to measure like how much more power do they have in comparison to other forms of structures, aka companies. Do companies have more power now, and especially smaller companies? So it's like perhaps is more wealth being concentrated into individuals' hands would perhaps be the way. I think the answer is
probably yes.
Yeah, I would say the bigger nations are perhaps even more powerful, but there's more wealth in individual people's hands. Is kind of how I would try and decide. And then they don't really describe a utopia, so I give them like plus marks for that. But it's also like their predictions are wavy, I would say. Like their predictions on technology and how individuals might consume it. I think that's pretty, like, they've done a pretty good job of that, more so than, other things I've heard in the past of, we're going to have flying cars. Well, okay, no, we haven't got flying cars. And time frames of flying cars have been way off. AKA look at just movies like the Back to the Future series and things like that. They had a whole bunch of stuff in there which we haven't got the flying hoverboards yet, for example.
I think you can get a flying hoverboard. I think you can get them.
Like an actual
genuine flying hoverboard, yeah.
Like the one Marty McFly used?
I think so.
I doubt it. I haven't seen anything as cool as that. You can get things which are cool, like when you've got those jetpacks, the water-fueled ones with the hose that you can fly, that's kind of like a jetpack in a way. And you can have actual jetpacks, but certainly not on consumer level.
Yeah, these definitely do not look like the
Marty McFly,
but they use drones.
Yeah.
To just spin them up.
I've seen things like that.
Yeah.
So, was that predicted accurately? Yes and no, in a sense.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to think, like, how would I recommend or say this book is predicted the future.
Yep.
Done it well for the small technological change. Small's a weird word to use there. It's done it well for individual technological changes and how humans use them. Cyber money, how we might use technology in our everyday lives. I think that they've done well predicting that. This overall global how humans relate to one another and especially to a state which taxes them, that hasn't come true yet. And so funnily enough, even though the book's called The Sovereign Individual, it talks way more about nation states
than it does about
most of the book is about nation states and how they operate, and they'll go through, for example, like a theory or a case study would be like, okay, if you're getting taxed at X amount of rate of your wealth, if you move to somewhere like Switzerland, where at the time, I don't know if this is still the case, they would have like a flat tax rate of 50,000 a year. And they were saying, okay, if you're just on average carpenter salary of, let's just say 70,000 a year, Switzerland's a terrible place to move to. Like not a good idea, because that's like 80% of your wealth is being taxed. If you're earning, 500 grand a year, that's a 10% tax. That's it's still a substantial amount. Maybe you can do better where you currently are. If you're earning 5 million a year, or
fine.
That's a no-brainer. It's a 1% tax. So they would then go on to say like, okay, if you if you invested that, and let's say you got 10% returns a year, you're beating the S&P, I guess, which is pretty hard to do. Maybe it's doable. You'd end up with, 52 million. If you could beat it by only 20%, then you'd end up with like, X hundreds of millions or whatever, maybe even to the billions. So they were trying to make these case studies saying like, it's rational for you and people to, when you've got the option to go to other places. I think they discount a bit of how much people, the intangible sort of things.
Yeah.
Staying with friends,
that's
families all in one location.
That's one of the things, the hate that this book often gets. And that's why I was like, I'm wondering if that's distinctly what they kind of call out, or if they more enforce it with the historical view on that, where there's an emphasis on the money. There's an emphasis on the allow yourself to move and be able to participate in that. And like all of that stuff is logical. Yes, if you can invest that much more money elsewhere than it's getting taxed here, well then, yes, you do come out ahead. But the screaming things that I've heard about this book is, but that's one fucking stupid vector in all of the vectors that exist, right? So, as an example, where we are in Brisbane, there's a lot of very cheap pools. There's a lot of free parks. If someone said, hey, fuck paying this tax I'm doing here, I'm going to go and live in, I don't know, New Mexico, somewhere else, right? And you go there, it's like, wonderful. I'm not getting taxed. Yes, I can invest it into the ETFs. But there's no parks. And also the pools maybe there is no pools either. I don't really have any family centers that I can go take families with. Or actually, like the gyms, they don't even use gyms here. Like there's not even acceptable. You have to build your own. So then I wouldn't even say those are the intangibles. Those are just like the other tangible things of a life that goes behind it. Kind of makes me think when I was young, 20 years old or something, part of my mentality was, okay, let's earn more money, maybe moving to America, maybe doing something else. And as I've gotten older, more and more has become apparent, also probably with traveling the world, but going, no, I just really like Australia. Like I really enjoy the beaches and I really like the communities that you can build out around, even beyond just the interpersonal connections that I have. And in that, maybe there are some intangibles that you could make a reasonable talk about. Well, Brazil has really nice beaches and this island has really nice beaches. But it's like, but there's something to it, the intangible that I really like about this place. So Yeah, I don't know if they come across it too distinctly about that.
So they talk about the inefficiencies and kind of the waste that a government has, and by and large, which I definitely agree with as a general principle, that governments are not productive. There's a lot of just waste. So, but they don't do a good distinction of, I guess, saying like with this sovereign individual, it kind of makes it sound like it should be for everyone, right? Like everyone can be and should, maybe not should be, but can be a sovereign individual if they choose to be. What I think they miss is like, all right, let's say you are in Australia and you're getting taxed at a really high percent, you're 50% if you're above 250K, I believe.
45%.
45%, sorry. And you're like, that's too much. I don't want to take that. If you were to then evaluate your options and say like, hey, I want to move elsewhere, I think the actual ability to do that, they probably don't highlight enough in this book, is that it's actually kind of hard. It's very hard. If you want to go to somewhere like, let's say, Norway, where they've got the sovereign wealth fund that gives dividends to their citizens, and I was just watching a little mini, not a documentary, but like an explanation of why Norway is so good at the Winter Olympics, for example, and they're just crushing it for a nation of their size. And a lot of it is because they've got this kind of redistribution of wealth from oil reserves, and so it goes back to the citizens more.
Right.
Once again, is that the best use of money? Rather than just giving them to directly, we'll stay out of that. I think if you want to become a citizen of Norway, it's like incredibly difficult, because it's a really nice place to live. So it's kind of, even though they talk about sovereign individuals and being able to move, I think it shows that yes, you might be able to leave one place, but I'm not sure of how accepting other places are for you. They kind of paint it as this idea that if you have wealth, other places will want you. Yes, you can see those graphs of like amount of millionaires that move out of certain countries per year, and that's probably a decent indication of where things are kind of going a bit backwards and which places are going like more attractive.
Yeah, but even in that, and I don't know how exactly where it would transition here, but with like say with UK, there's a lot of millionaires moving out of the UK, and you could make maybe a statement that, oh, well, these individuals are sovereign individuals. They can just pick up and go and move themselves into a digital age and move elsewhere. But if they're moving to somewhere like a Dubai, or if they're going to the US and they want to stay there permanently, they have to transition that, wealth in the digital space into some sort of physical or another way, which that nation state then accepts to allow them to stay. Hence, in a Dubai or in a US, you can pay for basically to stay there for 5 million, 10 million, buy a property, those sort of things. But you actually have to buy the asset, part of the nation state, to then be able to stay there. So, like, they are a sovereign individual in that they are able to pack up and go to do other things, but then you then have to participate in the new nation state to then be able to be there and participate. Yeah, and so I guess in that case, they'd make the claim in this book that it's more like a free market. So a lot of the ideas in here are libertarian, and so I got this book from the library, right? And there's someone who is very anti-libertarian and has like been highlighting things and putting exclamation marks and saying, oh, like this thing is stupid, this makes no sense, blah, 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 in really shitty writing. Like, can you understand that writing in the margin there? It's incredibly difficult. If you're going to deface like a library book, at least write it in legible English rather than whatever the hell. I can see moral equals money plus property, something, but yeah.
So I guess in that sense, the book is noteworthy in that it does get these
It does.
like strong reactions from people, aka someone who's willing to write in the margins of a book they obviously have read the full book because it's throughout the whole thing of like, this doesn't make sense and like this is anti-feminist or whatever. This is Ayn Rand something in a non-fiction or like changed into a non-fiction as some of the comments this person has made. So I guess like summarizing the book and the ideas within it, I think it's possible. Another book I will give a try and read of, and I'm kind of breaking my rules of not reading recent books, but Balaji's The Network State, I guess, is an extension upon this, and so that would then perhaps, if I find that compelling and he's got decent enough arguments or showcases of how these network states might arise, because they also don't necessarily say that you have to leave. It's more like you could create a special economic zone within your own one, or you could create they don't use the metaverse type communities where it's like corporations in the metaverse in Snow Crash, the book, not within the metaverse, but within the real world. They would be in like the United States of America, but there would be like a corporation owns this sort of land. So almost think of it like gangland type stuff. Like, this is this gang's territory. And so if you enter into this territory, you have to abide by their rules. And it's more dystopian in Snow Crash.
Sure.
It, showing more violence and like shit like that. Whereas, yes, potentially it could be a lot more of a not utopian, but more civil type of areas. And there are like communes, for example. I know plenty of people have started communes, and there's communes here in Brisbane for sure, where they have their own rules and their own like little mini economies,
operate on their own ways of being.
And you could look at things like Burning Man, which is more like a pop-up type network state, or that's where a whole bunch of sovereign individuals go for, I don't know how long that's for, like a week roughly or something. And so you could point at these little places and go like, oh, okay, yeah, this is perhaps like we're just in the first innings, or like the starting stages, the first quarter. We're only a quarter away through the century. Maybe we needed to get like more of this cyber money into more people's hands so they can become more sovereign. And then when they're more sovereign is when you will see like the decline of the nation state as a result of them then starting to implement, okay, I'm going to move to this area, or I'm not going to pay as much tax as you want from me. So I'm kind of hopeful that will happen.
Yeah.
Whether it actually will happen, I'm much more skeptical of.
Yeah, there's I think there's interlinked things that flow on from that I think even if you just start thinking through strands of it, it starts becoming a little bit unraveled you can't do it all at once, and even if you do it slowly, there's going to be some support of even the sovereign individuals, or else that nation state and the community kind of falls apart. So here in Australia, as an example, let's just say that most people started becoming sovereign, if you will, and all those sovereign individuals were like, oh, I'm not paying tax anymore because I've got my assets and everything else elsewhere. I'm not paying tax. Fine. But like just one little strand of that is taxation income, or that income gets distributed, as an example, to the NDIS grouping, and they support and do the payments and allow the flow for support for individuals in the disability network. Now, if from one year to the next, it was hey, we have no taxation money to give you, we can't afford anybody to be doing this anymore. And again, and underlying that means that all these people who are in the disabled networks, you don't get the support anymore. You would have to pay for it, potentially because private businesses would appear that would support that. But a lot of time this is subsidized by government, and this is in Australia. If they don't have the money to pay for that, that aspect of it starts breaking down in a community sense, let's just say.
Yeah, they touch upon like if you choose not to be a sovereign individual, and they don't explicitly say it like that, but it's kind of implied in a way where it's like, if you choose not to be, what's the difference between like choosing not to be or having IQ 85? Like, well, it's not really a choice to have IQ 85, so you're not gonna like really be able to. It's not like people are choosing to be IQ 85, other than
they have it. Yeah, I just think there's this. I think.
To finish that, it would be there is a underlying like brutalistic like, hey, if you're not sovereign, these things, these like nation state benefits are going to go away, and you won't be able to leech off of the state. Kind of brutalistic in a way, because it's like, are they choosing to leech off the state? Yes and no. Like, once again,
like as much as they're like, you're always going to have a percentage or a fraction that definitely are like leeching whatever nation state you're in. That happens, but then you're going to have another.
Look at the Minneapolis childcare luring centers.
Exactly.
So that's where you would say, okay, that's
same thing happens here. Same thing happens here in Australia. Same thing like everywhere. That like childcare is a quintessential business, which all taxations offices in the world have like very strong attack forces basically to try to go after them, but like it's hard to go after them. That all exists, but they do exist. So that will always exist type of that. So then if you go, okay, well, yeah, I need to go down the path of sovereignty because that will be beneficial. But yes, it is brutal because then you do have people who participating in the system. It does help out, and then they're fucked, like completely fucked. So then what happens to those individuals? So I think the harsh thing about the availability of being a sovereign individual is unless there's a more like general equitable way that things get spread out, it kind of benefits the people who have the things, and the people who don't have the things when everyone becomes sovereign are just like fucked because you just have no means for anything. You no longer have the support of a nation, like the nation state support, but you'd have none of the benefits of being able to move around and be portable and do the things that you need.
Yeah, and there's arguments to be made that this is the nature of evolution. Like, go look at any documentary out there, and well, don't look at the documentaries because they don't necessarily show just how brutal it is. Sometimes they do.
I mean, it's just like the evolution of humans, right? Like all of us are here today because it was the better specimens and the ones that survived out, sometimes by luck, but most often by just general evolution that allowed us to be today. And we're not absolute, dopes with the lowest IQ possible because they didn't continue on in the lineage, right? So yeah, but absolutely. There's part of it that'd just be evolution.
There's a brutality to nature, which humans, I was going to say, like, are we largely spared from it? Yes and no. There's certainly, I think, a bit more altruistic behavior in humans where it's like, all right, yes, we'll take care of the weak. And most of the weak and the disabled in the animal kingdom just get eaten.
True, yeah.
Die very quickly.
Although I think for the most part, it wouldn't be more altruistic than what the mandatory support that nations provide now. Like if you, as a whole, how much a nation state might support the needy. I don't think that replacing everyone to be self-sovereign and then people coming together, banding together to support people, I think you'd have less of that than what a nation state would.
You think?
Yeah. Same thing with roads.
Yeah.
I think if someone was like, if everyone was self-sovereign, if there really wasn't a state or whatever, and someone was like, I actually need my highway road extended out of 300 kilometers from the CBD because it goes to my house because my potholes are bad. I think the general sentiment is that there's going to be less people who are going to give a damn and give money for that, whereas a nation state will go, we've got rules and abiding that we actually have to provide access for this person. Okay, pay the $1 million to pave this road.
Yeah, this is where the kind of like libertarian in me or the free market says, like, if there was purely free market and no regulations, the bin service, for example. Like every now and then, they just don't come on the Monday where I put the bin out, or the Tuesday morning. And so it's like,
can't believe that. They're not
regularly. Yeah, I'd say like multiple times a year. They'll then come the next day and do it, but it's like,
really,
you know, that's a delay, for example.
What?
So that kind of service, and it's like, you know, I'm paying for that in a way, but it doesn't feel like I'm paying for it. So, you know, I'm sure if the government was like, hey, we're scrapping this program, private companies are going to collect your bins or rubbish, then I would have a much more like stronger reaction to them, because at the moment it's like, what am I going to do?
Sure.
Whereas, you know, in the case of me paying like a subscription or whatever it is for people to come collect my bins, then I'm going to be like, yo, what the fuck? Go to a different provider. So yeah, when it goes to these like extended levels, I kind of more believe that would be better, but then it's also like, where's the pure libertarian state?
But even
I
in
don't
that,
see one. So.
Yeah, but even an example, if it's, you know, I know this personally. There was a bus service that was provided down in Logan for one kid who lived just further away from the bus route, and the local council actually had a bus service going every day of the school year for this one kid to be able to get to school. And when that kid finished school, the bus route stopped. So they put it down. Yeah. Economically, like negative value. That like they would have lost epic amount of money, and everyone was paying for it, whether you wanted it or not, right? If you went to full libertarian mode, I don't think that if they polled this and people be like, hey, get $10,000 from every one of you to put this together and keep it going for the year. I think it would be a less palatable thing than the nation state or here the local government taking that, because it wouldn't just be that. It would then be like that plus another one, 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 plus another one. So in the end, if you had no state actors, no nation, you'd probably be losing more money than you'd actually be like winning in your taxes per se, because it's distributed across people and companies who are also earning more money. So if it just became equitable and everyone had to give a certain percentage, maybe there would be a rule, be like, but if you have $500,000 of assets, okay, you only have to give this much money. But if you have this much money, you have to give this extra amount of money. But if there's no rules, if it's pure libertarian, pure just give what you want, I think you'd have services like that have existed that just would not be funded.
I disagree, because then there's crowdfunding, for example, and you've seen plenty of things like that. Someone can't afford a bill, like they'll put a crowdfunding thing up and they'll be able to pay it. Not all of them get funded, but a lot of them do. So,
but it's in that, right? Yeah, a lot of it can funded, but not all of them. Now, if you multiply how many, who knows?
Is the government doing that for every single kid?
No, but that's what I mean. Like, let's just say if there was like that bus example, let's just say that maybe there was 5 other people who got support from a crowd to be able to do something else equivalently, and so people are like, oh yeah, fine, like we can all bunch together and help out. It's kind of like just a charitable view. But if you multiplied that by 100, because now there is no nation state support, no disability support. Let's just say the disability support network right now, like it's over, like it meant to get like obviously being absolutely routed and max used by people, and even more by people taking money out of the system. But if you had whatever it is, like 700,000 people in the disability support, and so it's like, okay, hey, we now don't have the taxation money that's coming through. Imagine crowd surfing by being like everyone has to support for 700,000 people, 500,000 people, something like that. I wonder if the sentiment for a person would go, okay, I'm happy to support crowd like one person or 2 person with charity, but if you're asking me to support 500,000 people, do you start going, okay, no, I'm self-sovereign. I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Ultimately I go like, are governments productive? You've been in them long enough. What would you say the efficiency level of the...
Yeah, and I think this is what people miss. I think it's the efficiency is very low. There is productivity. I think that it is productive in what they're trying to achieve, but they're low efficiency.
That doesn't make sense. How can you have both?
Well, no, you can be really, your efficiency can be really low, but productivity would be your ability to complete something.
Okay,
Can you complete something? It might be really slow. It might be really bloated, but you're you're taking energy and effort to find an outcome. And do they do that? Sure, because you can get these places where like, okay, you do get the bus that does this. I'm sure it was probably really ineffective and they could have done it in a way better way.
Okay.
Efficient and productive, but it might not be the most effective. That's definitely true.
Okay.
Governments are not effective.
Okay. All right. Well, that's probably even the more interesting thing that I want to get at. Do they actually affect the real world effectively? And this is where the argument would be free markets are the best way of doing that.
Correct.
People making their individual choices.
Correct. I think I agree with that too. I think the free market will result in a more effective process. But the important thing is that, and I think that, I don't know how much it covers this in this book, but right now the way of enacting a product or like enacting an action is by payment. And in that example, always the case is, okay, if the free market will do the most effective job of this particular thing, but that free market player needs to be paid. And if the person who wants the activity to be done doesn't have the money to fund that, then the action doesn't take place at all, zero. And usually, so the example that's given, it's kind of like the Doge example in the US, which is, no. We still want the government to pay for it, but I want it done effectively. That's what people are actually saying. What you're actually saying is in the free market, it's like, oh, no, I want to get a private business to run it, but I want the government to pay for it. And yes, it would be probably cheaper than what the government does. And so the understanding there is like, oh yeah, I still want, so the free market player will do it, which is like a business, and they'll do it better and they'll do it cheaper, and maybe they take a cut of the benefit from that, and it's still cheaper than the government doing it, but you're still having the nation state pay for the damn thing. So if you remove that payment provider and the person who's getting the action delivered has no money, then there is no free market to play at all, because that money doesn't exist in that. And I guess that's what I'm saying. It then would be that for the fiat or the amount of money that allows for the action is then more, I wouldn't say trapped, but it's just with the people who then have that money in their sovereign individuals. And my statement would be, I think there would be less percentage of those self-individuals who have all that money to just freely and wheely just give it as much as what a nation state does.
Sure.
Even if it is ineffective, but very inefficient. Inefficient.
Yeah, look, there's, to kind of wrap up this, there's definitely things that only can be done with very large amounts of coordination. And think of like the Panama Canal, digging that, for example, or creating a battleship. That requires an absurd amount of resources, an absurd amount of people all working together. How often do companies or like things that are done without coercion of taxing, of like, you have to pay this, versus like you can voluntarily invest in NVIDIA or things like this. How often do they occur? I guess like the testing point would be like if an individual company becomes like bigger than the government, something like that.
Yeah, I think the other way I guess I like generally explain it is that there's, at least here in Australia, I'll give you an idea from corporations' perspective. There's non-government entities, and there's government entities, there's non-for-profits, and then you've got profits, which are generally your companies, what you will. Companies or LLCs, the equivalent in the US. Now, a lot of the jobs that non-for-profits do, whether it's government-backed or non-government-backed, some of them, like non-for-profits, are by charity and people support that, but there's other things that are, and in that space, you'll have a lot of non-for-profits that are like screaming for money to be able to do the action, and they just generally don't get enough money. One that I've been looking into lately is like child trafficking. In those spaces, man, they are so like underfunded, right? And they scream out for more funds to be able to get the support and whatnot. If more people in Australia or in the world were more self-sovereign or had the ability to place their money where they will, I still don't know that this sort of non-for-profits would get more money. I think it'd be about as the same as it exists now, because the It could be because it's their marketing. It could be just because people don't give a shit to go and send that money there because they'd rather keep it internally for their own things. And it makes sense, right? I don't give that much money at all from a charity perspective. I like to keep it for me because I do things, right?
Yeah, once again, charities are not very effective.
Correct. And I kind of looked into this like a truckload, right? And so there's a bit of a middle ground where I don't mind nation states where they support the needs of people and other type of entities like that, because generally the public as a whole, you will care more about the things that are very internally circular to you and not for the external, even if there is fucking terrible inefficiencies and you have executives in these non-for-profits or governments getting paid ridiculous money when they probably shouldn't. It's like, I don't think the solution is that if everyone was self-sovereign, it would be better. But I also don't think that the solution is government. My view would be a smaller government size, still, but being more efficient and effective.
That's probably.
Like I don't think getting rid of it completely would be the answer.
First step. That's the first step. Smaller government. So, all right, we'll wrap up that bit of the I guess more esoteric chat, and then we'll jump on to some other things. I see a comment here from Cole, and he's saying, seeing America lose to Canada in male figure skating yesterday made me feel less sovereign. Oh shit! Sorry, Cole. There was a guy. I did see a guy. He looked like one of the most bizarre kind of creatures I've ever seen, and he was a figure skater. He might have been the American one. He kind of looked like the prince from Shrek. Sorry, not Farquaad, but the
blonde one.
The blonde one. So Prince Charming.
Yep.
Yeah, he reminded me of that. It was nice. It was a bit bizarre.
Good.
No
boostagrams.
Nope.
Got a couple of streams coming through. That's right.
The beanie.
Now, people, as I predicted, Bitcoin is down. So now is an even better time to be sending through some Satoshis across the board.
If you want a shirt, it's back down to $60.
That's right. No, not $60.
60 US.
60 US. That's right.
What's BTC?
Right now, BTC is 98 Australian, 98,000 Australian.
$98.
That's right.
That's
it's cheap.
Man,
it's cheap sticks now. Cheap sticks now.
Finding a shirt, decent quality mere mortal shirt.
That's right.
If you want to know more about that, meremortalspodcast.com/support. If you send in 100,000 Satoshis, we'll send a shirt your way. If you want to contribute in other ways, that's also listed on that same area. So a couple of different things which I actually really enjoyed from the book, learnt about, I would say, that I wanted to talk about here. So I've got a couple of different ones, which was the interesting history. So like the positive role of the church, more about the revolutions of agricultural industrial information, and returns on violence. Which one of those do you want to start with?
Let's go returns on violence.
So the way they framed things in this book was what actually made, I haven't given it a rating. I'm going to say like a 7.5 maybe. Okay. I found it interesting. It was a bit bland, and they kind of like meandered in some places where I'm like, where are you going with this? This is like, like I couldn't follow their train of thought as to why they were talking about what they were talking about. But they had a couple of concepts which I found really useful. Returns on violence was one that made real sense to me, which was how easy is it for someone to physically impose force on another person, and what benefits do they get from that? And so when they were going through the agricultural, industrial, and information stage revolutions, they talked about, okay, this is how individuals or groups of individuals can, like, they didn't give percentage terms, but they gave examples of how it was easy and not easy to get to use violence. So hunter-gatherer stage, before the agricultural, not much. There's returns of violence are very low because people you've got small bands of groups. They don't really own property. What can you get in return for going after people, and how enacting violence? one, it's very hard because there's like just mobile bans everywhere. And so, you know, you can go to the cave they're sleeping in that night and try and get something from them, but you have to find the cave first. You have to find the people first. What are you going to get? Maybe you can get some women. Maybe they've got a little bit of food there, but essentially you're not getting that much for a very risky outcome.
Sure.
And this is just assuming they're using like sticks and stones sort of weaponry. We get into the agricultural revolution, and this is where people are starting to fix themselves in farms, and now they are tied to a location. And so they don't have the ability to just simply move elsewhere because it's like all their crops are in this one place. That's when it starts to make sense to be like, I have 10 people and you're just as one farmer. I'm going to go with my band, say like, hey, either kill them and take all the stuff for myself, or, go more the extortion method of like, hey, you've got a bunch of stuff. I want 10% of it and you're going to give it to me, or I will fucking kill you and rape your daughter and stuff like that. And this is when like technology starts to come into it as well. So if there's technology that makes it easier for individuals to defend themselves, then you've got a bit more of like an even fight. So, one guy has a sword, another guy has a gun. Okay, the guy with the gun is in like the better sort of location. Or let's use a modern day example of someone's got a knife, someone's got a pistol. Who's going to win that? Like the dude with the pistol. And so there was this real interesting stage where I'll bleed this into the other idea, which was why the church had a really positive role from like the year 1000 to 1250. And I'd always kind of like, I've just been very dismissive, I guess, of the church as a concept. And they were talking about, okay, when we had like this agricultural revolution, kind of skipping the Roman era, and jumping into, I guess, it's like the Dark Ages. When you've got all of these like houses and farms located, a lot of them nearby each other, the role of the church was actually really productive. It was about pooling resources to defend themselves against like murderers and bandits and stuff like that. It was creating like cohesion between these separate peoples, and they were providing like, these areas where you could come together, pool resources, and there was actually a lot of benefits to the church. Like the church was actually really helping people in a way. And it was only after like a couple of 100 years was when it started to become more bloated, and there's where you see the corruption of like them giving out favors to certain individuals, church money then becoming involved in like private business, but then they could also say like, hey, you can't do this to other people, or only like the an example off the top of my mind is like you can only buy like a certain type of cloth from this merchant, and the merchant is like funded by the church.
Sure. Yeah.
And there was a couple of examples of you weren't allowed to do business on certain days of the calendar year, and it was like every Wednesday, for example. It's like every Wednesday you're not allowed to do any commerce. It's like, well, why not? It's like, well, because the church says so. And then they start building like these magnificent cathedrals, and the bishops have got all of like this finery, the gold, the Medicis, all of this sort of stuff. And that's when it's like 250 to 500 is when like the bloating, the corruption becomes too much, and then it devolves into like almost straight up bribery and things like this. So it gave me a real appreciation for, I guess, like the church as a concept for a period of time. and then
seeing it bloat.
Yeah,
and
so
transform.
I've always kind of just been like associated the church as when I say the church, I mean as like an organization, like the Catholic Church, as a purely like just negative thing. All I really know about it is like the history of corruption and stuff, and then in recent years like the pedophilia scandals and stuff, and it's just like, fuck, that's disgusting. I wouldn't want anything to do with this organization. But it gave me appreciation that, okay, as an organization, at least for a couple of 100 years, it probably was more beneficial than it was extractive.
Yeah. Yep. No, fair.
What was that look that you gave to the camera?
No, I was going to be like, I don't think you'll find Karen on Jeffrey Epstein's email list.
I hope not. I hope I'm not in there.
Someone go and check. Someone go and verify. I don't think we were even using emails during those years, 2013, 2014, 2015. Probably was, but...
Oh, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I would have been using my personal one for like some random stuff, but yeah, not much.
No.
And another one related to this was how nation states arose kind of from, let's say, like 1500s onwards. And so this was when it was like, you've got these fiefdoms. So like the church is kind of like declining in power. You're getting more commerce. People are starting to like, launch the ships. It was around 1500s or late 1400s. I think Columbus was starting to go
across.
Yep. To the Americas. And this is where you start to see like companies becoming a thing. This is where the Dutch East India, for example, the same type of era. So
I think it was around the time basically. It was a transition from kings and queens holding a lot of what is like what would have called like a nation state in terms of like the wealth, but it was actually attached to families and kingdoms, I guess is what it was. And around that time from Dutch East India, it was a transformation into like nation-like companies, which then made way for nations. Yep,
and I'd include like merchants is this as well. They had this kind of funny section where it's like the people with power were these individual like popes or like community leaders or something, and like being a merchant or businessman was how you would describe like a carpenter.
Like a merchant was a commoner.
Yeah, exactly, commoner. Really good word for it. They then started to like gain power, where it was like, oh, okay, money is power in essence, and this is probably like where a transition to like different monies were happening. And this is where we see like these nation states start to arise, because it used to just be like, even though there would be England, there was, King George over here and he owned this bit, but then there'd be the Duke of Wellington over here, and then there'd be like Lord fucking William Rees-Mogg over in this.
Something else,
And so there would be, even though, the king controls England, he doesn't really control what's going on over here in Lord whatever's place or Duke whatever's place. And they were able to form their own armies. So like the Duke would have his own army, the Lord would have his own army, and
I think even I believe, I'm pretty sure it was like the way that and it worked in like different ways, but kingdoms like that worked where it's like the Lord or the Duke that have their own like taxation or system.
Yeah, they got to
and
decide.
Then that would then go up into the kingdom as well. And then you'd have like everyone had to provide to the king, but each area, each sector would have to do their own means.
And the king, if he started to ask for too much, they could fight back. They could be like, oh, no, I'm not going to pay 45% tax on more than 200K a year, Mr. King, even though it would have been like £2 a year or whatever. No, we're not going to do that. And the king would have his own army. He could recourse to violence, I guess, but these dukes and stuff, they would have their own private armies as well. And what we see with the nation state is like, they did an okay job of sorting out why certain nation states were better at this than others. France, for example, during its revolution, was able to, they kind of tied it to direct taxation, as in some different forms of like technology allowed you to go to individual people and have like more registers, for example, and say like this person here paid tax and this person here didn't. And it's tricky because they tie it up to all of these other things, like, you know, the invention of the cannonball. How does that affect, or like that changes the nation, the course of war for sure. But how does that change it versus the invention of like the printing press, for example, and the combination of the two? How does that change it? So essentially they were talking about like, oh yeah, these nation states, even though they were like unproductive in a certain sense, because you're just getting like vast bulks of people and you're not having competition like you do with these dukes and stuff. When you've just got pure amount of resources, and I think they're tying it to like the way war started to form. The nation state was the way to really like enact war, and that the returns of violence of being a nation state like grew tremendously.
Sure, yeah.
And that's why nation states did really well and grew to like these big behemoth like countries again.
Sure. I mean, if you look at any map of like pre-Europe as it is now, right, and the absolute like, you know, the amount of individual countries and what was before that, kingdoms and fiefdoms and stuff like that, and now it's the collection of, you know, the grouping and things has become as it is because, you know, whether you want to call it the return of violence, the return of, you know, value based on violence or something else. Yes, there's been congregations because nations want to become bigger. But there's the thing about governments, right? Like governments or nations or anything like that, there is a propensity towards the growth and becoming bigger and becoming more powerful. And I think we use the wording of money and its efficiencies, but I think underlying that is power, right? There's power to do things, to control things, to operate in things, to do more, be greater. And you can do good with that, but then it also comes a lot of associated bads that just by default comes with that.
Yeah. With the Industrial Revolution, we started to see like more concentrations of wealth in like in these plants, for example. And then this is when power then goes back to the returns of violence. You know, they use returns of violence. They don't say power, which I actually probably prefer as a word, as a phrasing, because it makes it a bit more visceral. The strikers in these companies, for example, had a tremendous like return on violence, aka I'm going to go in and break the fuck out of these machines, and or I'm going to like force other people to not be able to work, and you'd only need 5% of the workforce to do that to essentially like enact a really beneficial return of violence on a company.
Sure.
So like, and I'm talking about cloth manufacturing, I'm talking about steel manufacturing, all of these strikes and stuff that used to happen, which don't happen as much nowadays, I'd say. And when you do see it, it is in these like, you know, the railroad companies striking or the buses striking, and that's because there's these physical things which you can now go to and like lock up or destroy. When things become more digital, you know, how would like the Coinbase, and we kind of saw it in a way, like the Coinbase employees a couple of years ago during the Black Lives Matter and stuff, they was trying to force Brian Armstrong to, you know, what's Coinbase's position on these matters, and he's like, we're a fucking company, like I don't even know what this stuff is about, like I don't have, we're trying to do the stuff with like cryptocurrencies. What does this have to do with our business? And there was like a striking of sorts, but how could they really strike? There was nothing to. Coinbase is more of a digital company, right? Like all their assets are digital. Sure, they've got a couple of offices and things like that, but there's nothing they could really do to force him to comply with their wishes. And so he essentially was like, oh, if you don't want to leave work here, you don't have to, and then offered some severance packages for them to go away, and a bunch of them did.
Yep.
So in that case, you could see like that wasn't, they weren't striking over a money issue, they were striking over like a political issue, moral issue.
I wouldn't even say the moral, political.
But their ability, and this I'm talking about the workers here, their ability to enact violence upon the company was negligible. They couldn't really do it in this cyber economy. And so this is where it's like ultimately getting to like, with the cyber economy, governments can't seize your assets, so you can move more freely is the I would say like main argument of this book.
Yeah.
And I can see that working. I agree with that. I think that makes sense.
I can see that. I can also see it not being that either in a way. Like, and I think the word portability is probably the best, and then you can be portable and move things around. But let's just take most of digital, because again, we exist in the most part in a physical world. If you decided that you didn't want to leave, let's just say Australia, let's go extreme, but you didn't want to leave Australia, but you'd done something terrible and the government really wanted to get you. What if you just go, cool, you have no internet, right? And by that I mean they have all the power in the world to exact on every provider in Australia of energy and internet to go, yep, you get no access. You get no ability for you to pay or have a signal.
See, this is where I go, when people say things like this, I go, how would they actually do that? Because in the case of like gold, for example, in the Nixon era, where they're like, no, you gotta give all your gold, or even before that, in the, I think it was like 1920s, 29 or somewhere around there, there was another gold thing where it's like you have to hand in all your gold we'll give you something in return.
Sure.
But they could go to people's houses and find the gold, I guess, in essence. How would they stop you from just like getting a friend to get an internet connection for you under a different person's name? And I guess like you could make the same argument, or like, what if I just lent my gold to a friend?
No, but I think there are ways obviously that you could get around things, just like any of these. You could also have like a way where I'll get a friend. But I think they could, if they wanted to, if you wanted to decide and be like, oh no, I'm not going to participate, and they really wanted to be extremists, you could be like, right now in the world of digital things, like they say in this world, hey, do you want to, you can take all your things that you own and move them elsewhere. Fantastic. You can get also be blacklisted by any government agency that exists in the world. You can be blacklisted, and it still holds true that, okay, well, you can use a friend to do certain things, to access those things, but your ownership of that thing is blacklisted. And by that I mean, if you were to take Bitcoin, for instance, and you want to purchase something through a particular way, and if that ownership still exists in a world of, like right now, of a physical world, let's say buying a property or something, you still can't buy that for yourself because you're blacklisted. Yes, you could get a friend to use the Bitcoin, let's say, and either maybe you can buy directly with Bitcoin or not Bitcoin, and then you can go and live in that house. But within the world of that, like for the government or that nation state, you don't own that. You could yourself say, well, I kind of own it because my friend bought it, but I live in it and it's actually technically mine. Sure. Yes, under that condition for you it is, but actually under the nation state government, you're blacklisted.
Yeah. I guess like it gets to,
and that happens really easily here in Australia. So like I know in certain places for like say any of the providers, any Telstra, Vodafone, Starlink, whatever, I don't care what you're using. At any point in time, at least in Australia, ASIO can and does tap every single thing that you go through, because that goes processed through the database that they have, and they use it to pick up, is someone searching for chemical warfare, is someone trying to do bad things. That's how they pick up people who are going to try to do terrorist attacks and the like. Basically, every agency in the world does that. There is zero things you can do to stop that. They do that all the time. You could, on that back end, basically put out a call out and be like, oh yeah, whenever this IP, this name, this address, this whatever's going through, is blacklisted. No provider can use it. You can't interact with it. It's basically zeroed out. So that is called blacklisting someone through any of the government agencies. And so that's an easy thing to do from a government. You have self-sovereignty because you're right. They don't have access to your Bitcoin, or they don't have access to other digital things that they can't extract that from you, but your ability to use them within that nation state is gone. So you would have to move from that nation to another nation.
No, I disagree with that, because it's like being able to, you can say that, but then there's like the fighting back of it as well. Like what other things could you do? You could start to use VPNs to protect yourself. You can start to, I guess, like the argument would be,
but even in that example of using a VPN, right? How would you even access the energy to get the VPN working? If you know what I mean.
I don't think they're at that granular level.
No, so like say a phone. So you're in a phone and use a VPN, right? So be like, okay, cool. I'll scramble to go through. That has to go through a provider to give you the signal. You know, like say an example would be Telstra still has to give you some sort of wave that allows you to access to hit the VPN.
Okay,
right?
Here's an easy example. You can just go to a library. Like you don't need to prove who you are in a library.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah.
So there's it's these ideas where it's like, you know, why? Well, the government just can ban Bitcoin. Well, it's like, no, they can't.
No, correct. There's a distinction. There's a distinction. So like with Bitcoin, no, any agency or any government or any place goes, we're going to ban it. We're going to ban. What they actually mean by that, even if they don't understand it probably, is they can restrict its usage and how much you can use it within the like ecosystem of whatever it is.
They can try. They can certainly try, but there's plenty of services, and this is why, you know, a lot of the ethos of Bitcoin is like anti-KYC, for example. There are plenty of services. Living Room of Satoshi. I'm pretty sure you can pay bills without needing to prove who you are, in essence. Like it routes through them. The bill gets paid. It shows that they were the ones who paid like for it. And it might be for a bill that's under your name, but it doesn't necessarily show that you're the one who's ultimately paying for it.
Yep, sure.
So I think like just with digital things, it makes it harder to enforce violence in stopping people from doing things. Like is the ability to stop people from taking a certain action harder or easier in the physical world or in the digital world? I'd say in the digital world, there's a lot more freedom. There's a lot more maneuverability, I guess, if you want to call it.
Yeah. This is where, like, I've heard, and I don't agree with this, but I've heard people, like older individuals, say also, like, no, that's bullshit. Cash is actually way easier to use and less traceable and all this than digital, because you absolutely have no control on it. I can go and use it and take it wherever. So I've heard that concept where it's like, you know, with a digital, you know, I kind of believe more so digital anyways, but you know, they can say, yeah, but if you take digital, you can't go and purchase whatever, something from Facebook Marketplace because they don't accept that and you can't use and transact it. But I can with cash. So cash should be the thing that remains strong. Now, I don't see that view, but I've heard that opposing view of why actually physical cash is a better portability than digital cash or digital assets.
And I used to do that for a while from 2014, 2015, 2016, around that period. I was using cash as much as possible for everything, like grocery bills, because it was kind of like I was going through a rebellious phase then. I was like starting to learn more about governments, being like, fuck this, fuck that, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
There's this thing related to anonymity as well. Like if you want to be anonymous, you need like a large data set of other people who are also anonymous. Because if you've only got 5 of you and you're trying to be anonymous amongst 5 people, it's still easy to like pick out individual behavior. And they use this for like the privacy coins, Monero or Zcash or whatever. If you've only got a couple of people using the actual coin, or even in Bitcoin, if you're doing coin joins where you're like putting all of these coins together, mixing them up, if you've only got like 2 people inputting into it, it's still relatively easy to see okay, like, yeah, sure, you mixed up some of these coins, but we know like you went in here, you came out here, you came out here. Whereas if you've got hundreds, thousands of people doing it, that becomes a lot more trickier to sort out after a while. So, I guess like the returns of violence and just it makes sense to me that it's harder to enforce actions upon people in the digital world. I personally believe that. I think it's harder to stop people from doing actions digitally than it is physically. So that's a good point for, or like a win for the sovereign individual. If you believe that.
I think the only way I put it is, I think to basically every single individual who would be listening to this, or to the self-sovereign individual who you think you can do that, you can, and it will feel like it's locked down. But blessed be your name and your entity if you actually had like the full power of a state that actually wanted to go after you. I think you would feel way less sovereign and way less able, I reckon, of moving digitally than even we think.
There's
been examples of this where it's like, I've read it in books where the example they generally give, there's all in spy movies and stuff like that, is basically if you wake up one morning, the government, should they wish, basically can like remove your identity from everywhere. So yes, you do have things, but imagine just every other little thing that you use or operate with to do things, and can absolutely remove it, because a lot of your stuff isn't also databases, that you would be like, oh shit, there goes everything, especially like historical stuff that you have done to operate with things. That would also be able to be manipulated, managed, if you will. You could be not blacklisted, but literally like used against you in a violent way. I think as much as one thing so that you can be self-sovereign, the nation states have a great way to be violent upon individuals if they wanted to.
Absolutely. It still exists. Like it's not that they have zero power. I'll read this little summary here, which they had. The argument of this book clearly informs the decision to redeploy your capital, if you have any. Citizenship is obsolete. To optimize your lifetime earnings and become a sovereign individual, you will need to become a customer of a government or protection service rather than a citizen. Instead of paying whatever tax burden is imposed upon you by grasping politicians, you'll be better positioned to prosper in the information age by freeing yourself to negotiate a private tax treaty that obliges you to pay no more for services of government than they are actually worth to you. That's kind of like the ultimate summary of this book, in essence. Have we seen that in the real world? I think to a certain extent, yes. I know plenty of like crypto people who have moved to Dubai, who or personally, well, yeah, no, I do know a couple personally who have moved to Dubai. I'm pretty sure there's others who would move to El Salvador, have moved to El Salvador because they offer certain things. Once again, if you move into El Salvador, I didn't go there personally, but I went to a couple of countries around there. You're going to be giving up a lot of amenities and other stuff to do that, but you can find nice places to live there as well. So, it's interesting ideas. I like the book. It's more of an idea book, I would say, to expand your mind. If you're if you're willing to like do a bit more work, because the book is a bit thick, meandering at some stages. Some stuff you'll probably struggle with and be like, I don't know about this. But certainly like a mind expanding book. I'd give it positives for that. So
I think overall what I've heard from it and from people discussing it is, I would agree.
And decent for history as well. There's some really nice history points where I went, oh, this was just as much a historical book as a future predictive technological book.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I feel like it puts a lot of emphasis on like the accesses of money and power and control, which is good, like to think about. But don't confuse it with the other aspects of humanity that like this book just doesn't attempt to try and articulate or talk about. Like it's not about that either in this book. So I think don't go in the expectation that this is the answer to all of that. It's like, no, it's just if you're looking at it in this particular plane of thought.
No way.
And then discuss it up and down.
They don't talk about value in the book, for example.
Yeah, I think the big thing that doesn't go about value, doesn't go into morality, doesn't go into ethics, doesn't go into transience, doesn't go into like all these things, but also it's also, I think more and more when I come into books now, I'm like, it's nice to connect with what am I removing expectations, I guess. So if you remove all of that, I think this is a very interesting like thought take about, okay, in this area, what are those shifts and changes?
Yeah, I'd probably say like ideas and books for me are kind of like a Jenga tower type idea. You know, there's only so much information you can hold in your brain. So like when you're taking stuff from the top of the tower, you're removing something. Like for each book that I read, I'm probably like forgetting some stuff. My dad talks about this all the time. He used to read tons, and now he's just like, I can't remember what I used to read. That being said, he will still bring out ideas that he has read from certain books. Certain books have stuck with him.
Sure.
And I feel like that's what reading is for me. It's to like, you know, I'm removing a piece of the Jenga tower. I'm probably at the stage now where I can't remember every author and book that I have read. And that's why the book reviews channel is nice, because I can at least go back upon a bunch of this stuff. But there's certainly some which are like, you know, that a little bit average, middle of the road. I'm thinking like, you know, more from less. That there's maybe like one key idea that I took from that book, which was interesting, but I can't remember who wrote that anymore. I'm taken that piece off, having read this, and then I'm now like inserting that hopefully into like a more stable place. So it's forming like a bit more, perhaps like imagine like the Jenga tower, instead of being like this wobbly thing where it's in a V shaped. I'm taking something that's wobbly at the top, that's, you know, making my ideas or my ability to live in the world worse because it's fucking shaky. I'm taking it from the top and then I'm putting it down the bottom, so I'm forming more of an A shape to hopefully form a better, more fundamental structure.
More structured tower.
Yeah. So this book, I think, has done a decent job of that. I think it's taken an idea that was a bit, hopefully has removed some stuff that was a bit more wobbly and made something a bit more stable, and has given me a really new word to use, which is megapolitical. They use this in the book a lot, and they somewhat defined it, but it was essentially there's politics, and then there's talking about like the things above politics and what they represent in essence. So like if you talk about politics, I love Chris Fisher. He's got a show This Week in Bitcoin. I find it useful for like some information and news, but he talks a lot of things about, like today he was talking about, you know, Trump had these comments on Besant, and Besant was saying this, but I think, you know, maybe Trump was saying this negative thing to like create more of the illusion, like good cop, bad cop, that or this new Fed chair, there actually is independence and all this stuff. And I'm like, maybe. I don't care though. Yeah. Like this is uninteresting to me. I'm more there's other parts of the show that I do find more interesting. That's politics. Mega politics is the thing above that, which is like, what will the ultimately like happen to the US dollar?
I think the more clear, I think, as you were saying, it's like there's the politics at the human level and there's the politics of the idea, like the ideas.
Yes, yeah.
So that seems to me like what the concept of megapolitics is. Like, okay, it's the politics, but that is of the ideas that are at those upper levels, whereas the politics at the human and the individual levels, that is what the clear politics of it was like, oh, we don't we don't care about this. I don't care that this person said that, but they actually said this, and they're avoiding the question. Like, fucking, who cares?
Yeah.
But the megapolitics is the ideas, the actual politics of the ideas themselves, of currencies and how does nation states work together. And yes, that is politics, but those are the ideas that are probably more interesting and applicable and changes to all of us.
And you could say the same for geopolitics. I find that largely interesting. Oh, China's going to do this because it believes like it won't invade Taiwan because of this reason, but the US comes in and like this. You've got geopolitics where it's like isolating individuals and saying like what they will do or not do. Once again, I find that largely bullshit, uninteresting, lots of theories, not a lot of like measurable statistics and stuff. If you want to talk about like what makes a nation prosper, or like what sort of actions how does a nation state form, like this book talks about, that's kind of what I would put into like the megapolitics.
Yeah, I like that. Again. Yeah, no, I agree.
So once again, it's not even just individuals it's not the individual, it's not talking about the party within the individuals in,
right,
it's not
like
talking about the nation that it's within, it's like how it ultimately like will come back again to like what makes individuals tick and why do we take certain actions. But yes, also as the like ideas on a grand scale, what do humans do on a grand scale? I find that interesting. So yeah, megapolitics as a concept was, even though this book probably used the word politics a shit ton of times, I didn't find it as inane dribble as most
politics might be.
Politics is, yeah.
Nice.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
Very good. I think we'll leave it there. I don't know if there's any other comments at all
no
to
more
address. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening in. Once again, you can support the show by tuning in, by sharing it with friends, by sending through some Boostagrams. As we said, mereimmortalspodcast.com/support. If you want to go and support us in that various ways, you can do that. Bitcoin is at sale right now. So, get in there, get some sats, and share the love as well. I think we'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much for listening in. Once again, we are live at 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Times on the Sundays. Be well. Juan, out.
Karen out.
Good.